What up, and welcome back to another Malazan Book of the Fallen video. This one is going to be chapters 21 and 22 of Deadhouse Gates. These are the last little short chapters in between that big, chunky, grand finale. So let's get into it. You guys know the drill. We're going to do the whole chapter, and then I'm going to tell you when to jump out so that we can get into all that spoilery goodness. But this one picks up over in Raraku with Felison, and she's all in her camp still with her high mages, and they're kind of making their way towards Korbal. They have this whole conversation about kind of when did Shake or the Whirlwind Goddess or Drajna or whatever pick Felison to be her target, and she's like, you know what, she never did. There's like no ability for them to know the future for sure, especially when it comes to the Whirlwind, which is kind of all about chaos and just unpredictability. So there was no like grand conspiracy to get her to Skull Cup and then have her escape and somehow get spit out in the desert so that she would eventually become the Whirlwind Goddess. There was kind of none of that going on. It was just some kind of like happy accident. At least that's what Felison kind of puts out there and kind of contends. Hiboric doesn't really buy it, of course. He thinks there's like some other, whether it's fate or somebody else was kind of pushing the strings and kind of ushering that along a little bit. She says that she can kind of sense that Korbal is kind of trying to hurry up and get the job done and like reap his sadistic revenge in her name and get it all done before she can get there and kind of put a leash on him. Hiboric is like, this is kind of like all for nothing. When Tavor gets here, she's going to just crush this entire rebellion, and that is gonna be that. Just look at what she did to you, right? She didn't have any qualms about throwing her sister under the bus. You think she's gonna care about throwing this entire country under the bus and doing what needs to be done? Felison actually thinks like, hey, I think I can actually go toe-to-toe with her because unlike all these other enemies that she's had to face, I have this kind of intimate knowledge of my sister. But she kind of leaves it at that, and then they roll out to kind of collect Korbal. Mount up. Then we go over to Aaron for one of those scenes that just makes you want to rip your hair out, gouge your eyes out, whatever. We get Nether, who takes Diker up to the top, basically, of the parapets for Aaron, and they're just looking out. We get Blistig up there, Pormqual, and Malik Rel, and they're just straight up looking out over this battle and just watching the Wiccans, the rest of the 7th Army, everybody just straight up get decimated. They're just sitting there watching, doing absolutely nothing.
I didn't do anything.
And you basically have these last like 400 fighters, including Coltane, who is just fighting like a wounded boar, basically. We have him surrounded by Wiccan cattle dogs. Ben is fighting tooth and nail, just feathered with arrows and still fighting on. The army has just been straight up fighting like this for days, so you can just imagine the struggle that whittled them down to this final 400. We get Diker, who tries to straight up strangle Pormqual justifiably, and Blistig stops him, and he's like, dude, we got bigger fish to fry. And we get Corporal List, who's like one of the last ones left, and he's holding that Wiccan standard, the standard of the 7th, and just waving it as Bolt, second in command, finally goes down to like 7 dudes. List drops the standard and runs forward, tries to save him or something, and straight up gets decapitated, and that was a wrap for List. And Erickson, I think, just does a great job of like calling back to all of those people who meant so much to Diker, meant so much to us on this like hellish journey from Hisar all the way through the trials and tribulations, and we like kind of revisit, List and Bolt and Bent and Roach and Coltane.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
And then it's Coltane's turn himself, and he just basically gets overwhelmed. Bent, I think it is, tries to get in there, or one of the big Wiccan cattle dogs tries to get in there and gets lanced, and just, testament to just what G'd up dogs these things are, that he like wiggles himself all the way down the lance and takes the guy's throat out one last kill before he goes down. And then they take, Coltane and string him up. Nil and Nether lose their shit. We see this whole giant swarm of crows, way more than the 11 that it took to hold Sormo Enath's soul when the Wiccans were originally conquered back in the day. But they don't actually kill him. They just straight up string him up and crucify him. Bam! And they start, Korbal Dom and Camus Relo with magic totally start attacking all these crows and taking them down. Blistig sends for Squint. And this part honestly doesn't take long to tell, but it just comes so quick on the heels of realizing what's going to happen. Just that realization that, there is not going to be that saving grace for Coltane, the Wiccans, the rest of the 7th, the way that there was for the refugee train, right? And just seeing Squint kind of, realize what they're asking him to do, grapple with the morality of it, the murder, mercy dichotomy playing out right there in real time, and just seeing him, ultimately make that 1,000-yard shot directly into Coltane's head, killing him to free his soul, and it totally breaks Squint too, right? And even as, Blistig is there trying to like console him and say, look, you granted him a mercy, you're a hero, we see that both the power of Coltane's soul rising up and the force of all of these thousands of crows there to collect it totally like shunt aside all of the magic from Camus Relo and Korbal Dom, and they collect Coltane's soul and carry it away for him presumably to be reborn later on. Woosa. Chapter 22 picks up with Callum washing up on the shores of Malaz City. He immediately basically takes down a couple of groups of Claw. He's like mad injured, but just through sheer like force of will, he's able to like regulate his blood pressure and breathing and all this stuff to like basically not be affected by these wounds that he's sustained. He takes down more Claw and has this conversation with Topper, who's like the head of the Claw Master, who we met back in Gardens of the Moon when he was escorting Ganos to the battlefield to link up with the Bridge Burners for that first time. Actually, I think Topper was taking him to visit Lacine for the first time, but we find out through Topper that it's not just a couple of hands of Claw that he sent through. There's just mad hands. There's a lot of Claw out for Callum tonight. But Callum isn't scared. He's not fazed by it. We get to see, honestly, a lot of different times just like what a badass Callum actually is again and again with all these various Claw.
Oh, he's good. He's good.
Then we get back to the group that's inside Tremorlor, and Pust is talking about how Shadow Throne schemed to, feed Icarium to the Azath house, basically to Tremorlor. But then Pust says it's more like a proposal because the Azath obviously is a tree and it didn't, answer back, at least not to him. And actually this chapter is really cool because you get to see a little bit more about the Azath, which is like the total enigma of the series. We get Relic, who's Absalar's dad, who notices this mosaic on the ground of all these different tiles. And basically all of these different tiles, correspond to places that are out there, both past and present, maybe even future, that have ever existed, so that there's like kind of an Azath house in each quote unquote place, to make it basically like a network of all these different Azath house. And as they're kind of pondering all of this stuff, Iskar Pus just straight up disappears, drops through the floor, gone.
Bye, Felicia.
And they see through this hole that he fell through that like literally they're just straight up floating on like this thin mosaic tile that's like the thickness of a tile, and then it's just straight up oblivion behind him. You get some of Mappo's internal monologue, and he's like, dude, what are we doing going to, Malaz City and all this stuff with these guys? We don't really belong here. And then as he's thinking that, they straight up drop through the floor, him and Icarium as well. also disappear. Then we go back to Aaron, basically, and outside the walls, Korbal Dom is just like raging it up, partying, celebrating his victory, killing Coltaine, and all of that stuff. We see that Nepthara, one of the nobles from the refugee train on the Chain of Dogs, is there reporting to Pormqual, Malik Rel, and Blistig, and he's totally got this whole alternate theory or history going on, and he's blaming, Coltaine and the Seventh for all this crazy mistreatment, including Diker. Blistig really wants Diker to give his side of the story, and he's like kind of in this fog and so traumatized from what he's just been through and seeing Coltaine go down and all that stuff. He eventually kind of snaps out of it and says, you guys are stupid, because Pormqual is planning to go out there and stick it to Korbal Dom for taking down Coltaine. Now all of a sudden he wants to act for some reason, and Diker's like, dude, they have way more people than you now. Your whole army just got decimated out there, and Nepthara is just, totally in his ear, spitting all this venom, and they're just eating it right up. And of course, he, locked up all the red blades and stuff like that. And so what Diker is saying is, look, we're in Aaron. We got these huge walls. We should just, make them invest us. We have Tavor on the way. She's going to relieve us, and we'll be able to stick it to him then. But they decide that they want to go out and lead this big old sortie and have this kind of blaze of glory or something for revenge. And he makes Diker go with him too, and tells him how at the end, they're all going to get strung up and, either executed or locked up for days. And Nepthara's like, you know what? You should have been nice to me. See what happens. I told you this was going to happen. And Diker's like, you know what? You're right. So what's the worst that can happen? And he straight up gives him a boot to the throat and 86s him, which was the one gratifying part of this whole chapter. Although I take that back, because the other thing he does is he tells Malik Rel what he really thinks of him, and is like, I'm coming for you, Rel, or I wish I could kill you. I forget exactly what he said, but I do remember it was dope.
I just want you to know I hate you.
And then, of course, surprise, surprise, Pormqual leads them all right directly into a trap. Malik Rel says it was, Diker's doing, and he totally double-crossed him and backstabbed him, when, of course, it was Malik Rel who did that himself. He's like, dude, we got to negotiate a surrender. And Diker's like, negative, bro. He's like, we got to cut our way out. He's like, we still have weapons. Aaron's right there. Let's book it and get home. But, of course, what happens? He straight up, Malik Rel convinces Pormqual to get everybody to push their arms out to the edges, lay them in big piles, and then Malik Rel basically hand delivers this entire army to Korbal Dom and Camus Relo. Diker does get a chance to free his horse, but that is essentially a wrap.
I'm as mad as hell!
But the funny part is that Blistig stayed inside the walls, and so even as they totally have this huge crushing betrayal that obliterates the entire rest of Pormqual's army, Blistig is still inside the city, and even with the small contingent, he can, button it up tight and hold that fortress for days, certainly enough time for Tavor to get there. And that's why, to borrow a quote from way down the line without getting too spoilery, it's even though they lost Wiccans, Coltaine, the Seventh, they actually also won too, because, even with this major betrayal, the refugees, a part of the Wiccans and the Seventh that made it through, the wounded and whatnot, do survive through, even, again, with Malik Rel totally betraying everything. They also weren't able to find Squint, who they really wanted for kind of taking Coltaine out early so they couldn't torture him. That was pretty good. They also decapitate Pormqual almost immediately, so that was a little bit gratifying, but the rest of it was just pretty gruesome, because they literally take every single soldier in what becomes known as the Aaron Way and straight up crucify almost 10,000 Malazan soldiers all along the road to Aaron. And so now you can see just how, brutally hardcore Steven Erikson is. He gave us those previous two chapters where you get a little bit of hope. Diker, the refugees, Nether, etc., making it to Aaron, only to have the carpet ripped out from under you. And for me, these were just, some of the most emotional chapters. They were short and they flew by, but just seeing, again, List go down and Bolt go down and Coltane and what it does to Squint and seeing it all through Diker's eyes and, had a lot of emotional impact for me. So that's the end of the chapter stuff. I do have quite a bit of spoilery stuff that I want to just throw out to get the conversation going. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week with the finale for Deadhouse Gates. For the Malazan vets who want to get into the spoilery, speculation-y stuff, I'm curious to know, since Darajna didn't plan for Felison specifically, does that mean somebody else did? Was it Shadow Throne who kind of manipulated all the events because Tavor sent her sister off to Skullcup? Could he have predicted what was going to happen? He laid the whole false path of hand, so he knew somebody else. He obviously was very keyed in that Shake had gone down and someone was going to take that over, or is it just all like some crazy happy accident? The other thing is, I'm just so looking forward to seeing some baby Coltane up in Witness. I wish we could have gotten like more foreshadowing of, baby Coltane, because they, in the epilogue we see, or in this chapter, we see the crows take him away. We see in the epilogue that they deliver him to this, Mybi-ish chick in the Wiccan tribes, but then we don't really hear much, so it's just kind of hung out there and then never followed up on. And even just like recording that piece with List almost had me like crying again, where he's like waving the flag, goes to help Bolt at the end, and to me, I was just like so attached to that dude. I can't believe that there's people out there who say that the characters aren't good. We don't see a lot of dialogue from List, but you get a real sense, or at least I felt like I did, of who he was and what he stood for and what kind of dude he was. Same thing with Bolt and Coltane. I mean, there's not a lot of dialogue or internal monologue. You don't see, you're only seeing him third party, but yeah, the attachment for me was very real. So again, this one hit me in the feels super hard. Boom, boom. I also love how, like, at the end of chapter 21, Malik Rel, like, leans in and tells Diker, like, don't worry, Korbolodam's gonna pay for his betrayal of these Malazans. And in, like, a way, he actually makes good on that promise and totally, like, double crosses him way down the line when he's coming into his own power. Hashtag Team Malik. I also just think, like, chapter 22 is a wealth of information when it comes to the enigma that is the Azath, right? Because we get lots of different stuff about their consciousness, about them acting deliberately. I mean, they definitely separate out the teams, right, and make Iskar all Pus go through at one place, and then, Mappo and Ikarium and Fiddler and the rest of the team at different places. And so that wasn't just an accident, right? There's some deliberate acting going on there. There's like all that mist that shows up when the tile disappears and it kind of heals itself. We have Race talking in Darujistan about how his Azath house wasn't happy or was cranky, or, you want me to ask it. We have Gothos communicating with his Azath and talking about how they have all these plans for Ikarium and with the nameless ones and all of that. The suit of armor that talks to Moby. So there's clearly like a lot of, their cognition is there. There's like, I don't know if there's a personality, but they're acting with deliberate intent, even if we don't have access to what that actually is or looks like. Also, and this is something that we were talking about in the Discord, because Blistig is like such a D-bag later on in the series that it's easy to forget. Like in Deadhouse Gates, he was actually the one like who was super pissed that they couldn't go out and rescue Coltane, and like actually seemed like a good dude trying to get Diker to tell his side of the story against Nepthara and to keep the name of the Wiccans and all that in good favor. I just thought that was interesting because Blistig is a dick, and it's kind of nice to see him in this first light like, hey man, this guy seems legit. This is also the chapter where Keneb connects the dots on Malik Rel being like a total scumbag and selling him out with all the stuff that he heard back out in the desert, working with Korbal Dom, talking about the gistles behind the walls, all of that stuff. The other thing, and this one hit me in the feels hard too, but I just love how Hood comes for Diker and just has all that compassion in his eyes. And Hood is just such an awesome character because, you know, everybody thinks like the god of death, loves killing people and, you know, loves when people die. And he's actually just like the most compassionate. He's not there, you know, rooting for people to die and stuff. He's just like kind of the caretaker of the realm where people go. And yeah, Hood's the bomb. He needs his own video very soon. I'm going to make that. And then lastly, I just love how Malik Rel totally makes himself like subservient to Korbal Dom and makes it seem like he's a total bootlicker when in reality he's playing him just like he played Pormqual and everybody else. So again, hashtag Team Malik is just dominating. You got to give it to that guy. So yeah, that's it. Let's get the conversation going. Thank you so much for watching. We'll leave it there. If you liked the video, make sure to give it that thumbs up. Subscribe, turn on those notifications so that you never missed a video. Buy some merch, join the Discord, all that good stuff. And until the next time, happy reading.